This session we talk about remote management and RAID controller. What is remote management? Whenever we are going to talk about the physical server, most of the servers we are talking about virtualization. So the physical servers are located in a remote location. So we need to access the console of the physical server to perform certain actions on the console. The starting one is installation. We have to perform ESXi host installation on a remote server. How to perform on a remote server? Generally, whenever we have a system, laptop, whatever it may be, you are going to load operating system by inserting a CD and then external media or any way to install the respective operating system. But how we are going to perform the installation or troubleshooting on a remote location server? So while talking about virtualization, the servers will be there in data center. So and the administrator who are working on virtualization, they are going to sit in different place. So from there, how to access this particular server? For every physical server in virtualization, we talk about type of server hardware. So most of the servers, either they are going to use a rack server or a tower server or a blade server. Whatever the server they are going to use, for each server, they are going to access that server through remotely. How to access a server remotely? Remote management in the sense I can do power, I can sit, whatever the actions I can perform by sitting in front of system. I can press power button, I can reset power, I can do connect screen and see the screen, what is happening on the server, how it is booting. I can change the BIOS setting. This is a remote management card. Whatever the actions I can perform by sitting in front of the system, those all actions I can perform through remote management. There are different types of remote management cards. Remote management card is nothing but it's just like a network interface, which having an additional capability of providing some additional application that we call it as a remote management application. What is this remote management application is going to do? Whatever the screen, if you are sitting in front of the system, whatever the actions you are able to perform, all these operations I can perform on this particular application. So how it is going to work? It's just like a network card. They are going to assign an IP address to that network card, and then we are going to access that particular remote management interface through in a browser. As soon as you enter the browser that respective system management, remote management IP address, it is going to ask you enter username and password, the credentials. Once you enter the credentials, it is going to show the system information. What is the health? Is it in power on state? Is it a power off state? Complete information of that particular server, it is going to show in that particular web interface. So by seeing that, we can perform, we can understand what is the server health, is there any errors, complete information of the server, we can able to see that in server, that we have web interface. So remote management card is nothing but it is a remote tool to connect the physical server from an interface directly. So that whatever the actions you are going to perform, you can perform by accessing the respective web interface IP address. By accessing the IP address, we can see, we can perform whatever the actions are required, we can do. So I can show you some live examples like YouTube. We can search in internet by next class. If I am able to connect a remote management, if any server is available with remote management interface, I can show you live environment. If not possible, I'll try to get the search YouTube and then provide the how the remote management, what are the actions we can perform, all those things. It's just a simple interface wherein you are just browsing internet and you are able to Google. How you are able to do Google the same way? Instead of Google, we are going to mention an IP address in the web interface. With that as soon as you enter an IP address, you are going to get a login screen. So once we are provided the credentials, it is going to provide the system information, whatever the server you are connected, that's complete system information. You can do power reset, you can power off, you can power on. What are the actions you are going to perform? The same actions you can perform remotely by using this remote management controller, remote management card. It's just similar to network interface. It has a RJ45 connector so that we can connect the network cable. Once it is network cable is connected, we are able to establish communication. Once we are able to establish communication, we can perform all actions. So what we are going to do once the server is ready, we can do perform. The next step is we are about to install operating system. What operating system installation? Here we are going to talk about virtualization. So whatever the virtualization software you are going to load, you can load. There is no CD-ROM. So how to mount virtual media? The same ISO image, whatever the ISO image is available on the same ISO image we can mount, we can map to that remote management interface so that it is going to consider as a CD-ROM to that particular server. How to map, how to load ISO image, everything as a part of administration, you should aware, you should know. It's an interview questions, how you are going to perform remote installation. How to perform remote installation? Either someone has to put the CD and that media, or else they need to connect external media, or else they need to provide a certain access. How they are going to provide an access? Generally, for every enterprise environment, physical server, by default, it comes with remote management card. Once remote management card comes, we can able to access that remote management card, and so that we can connect to the console. I told you what is a console is nothing but the screen, what you are looking at the screen, that we call it as a console. As soon as you power on your laptop system or a desktop system, on the screen, whatever the things we are able to see, that particular screen, we call it as a console. So here we are going to talk about server which is available at remote location. So we are not sure what is happening on the screen. So we are going to connect console. How we are able to connect console? By accessing remote management card. So there are different vendors available for remote management. If you purchase IBM hardware, that IMM, integrated management module, Dell, it's a DRAC, HP, ILO. There are different versions available even in remote management card. The basic term remote management card, and its name changes according to the respective vendor. IBM, Dell, HP. There are different vendors, hardware vendors available. We talk about Cisco UCS, Cisco Unified Computing System, Cisco UCS. Cisco uses, we talk about blade enclosure. That enclosure is going to have 16 off-white blades. We discussed about how all 16 blades, how I'm able to access. They are going to provide a individual remote management IP address or the blade enclosure IP address. By accessing the blade enclosure IP address, I can connect any of the server out of 16 servers, 16 blade servers. So UCS, Unified Computing System, it's a powerful tool by Cisco. We can manage a lot in that particular tool. Okay. we are going to talk about how we are going to access the server remotely. There are different vendors available. For each vendor, there is a different way of connecting. Whatever the application they are going to call, the background, the basic understanding, it is a remote management card to connect a console so that we can go to the BIOS, we can perform, we can mount ISO image, everything. We can do all the things. By sitting remotely, I can switch off the system. I can power on the server. I can power on the server. I can connect the console, and by connecting the console, what are the actions I can perform. That's all about remote management card. Without understanding remote management card, which in virtualization, why it is so critical? Because we are going to work on physical servers. Virtualization in the sense only physical servers. We'll talk about only physical servers. Without physical server, there is no virtualization concept. We have to load a virtualization operating system only on a physical server. So how we are going to access the physical server which is available at remote location? That's the way the remote management card. Hope it's clear. Next, RAID configuration. Before going for RAID configuration, what we need to understand is there is a two terminologies. What are the two terminologies? One is redundant, the other one is high availability. When we are going to call it about redundant, when we are going to call about high availability, we generally talk about failover. We generally talk about failover. What is a failover? What is a concept it is going to come up? So go to Google, you can search internet redundant versus high availability. What is redundant? What is high availability? What is failover? Failover. The concept comes in active or standby. They call it as active and passive. What is this terminologies we need to understand before going for RAID? And this redundant and high availability is a very critical components in in virtualization or in a cluster configuration. What is a cluster? All those things come into picture. First, redundant, we are going to talk about. Redundant is nothing but we are going to talk about a physical part. Physical part, if it is one part is not working properly, so automatically that physical device is going to move to another device to perform our work. The redundant can be come into any way. For example, I have two hard disks. I loaded an operating system on one hard disk. Out of available two hard disks, I loaded an operating system on one hard disk. For example, that hard disk went wrong, something issue, due to which I'm not able to access any files on that particular hard disk. What will happen? My operating system is not going to load whatever the data I saved on that particular hard disk. I'm not going to get the information. So what will happen with the second hard disk? Because I didn't load the operating system on the second hard disk, I cannot save the data on the second hard disk. So there is no use of having second hard disk because I have two hard disks. I loaded an operating system on first hard disk. Due to some reason, that first hard disk went wrong. It failed. So my system is not going to come online. So how to make it a redundant? How can I configure both hard disks together so that even one hard disk fail, my system can work without that particular failed hard disk, without affecting that failed hard disk. So how do we achieve that? By using two devices, how can we achieve high availability? What is high availability? My operating system should up and running even one failure, one hard disk failure. I'm using two hard disks, even one hard disk failure also, I should in a position to perform my servers be working fine. How to make it that? This particular redundant is going to come into picture whenever we are going to use two devices, even one device fail, I can able to work with other hard disk, other device. It can be applicable to anything. It can be a hard disk. For example, network card. My system has a network card. Only one network card is there. If that network card is failed, what will happen? I cannot establish communication. So how to achieve redundant? To achieve redundant, I should have another two network cards, two network ports, so that I can configure kind of failover. If one hard disk, one network card is fail, automatically the network traffic can switch over to available network card. It can be applicable to switch, physical switch. I have two switches in enterprise environment. In every place, they are going to configure a kind of redundancy. Redundancy in the sense, if one device is failed, my environment should up and running with another device. Internet. How important is internet? In our office, we have only one internet connection. If internet is not working, what you are going to do? You are going to switch over to mobile hotspot. That in the sense you are maintaining one broadband internet, one mobile internet. So what you are doing there, kind of redundant. My internet connection, if something is not working, I am switching over to available network. So you are maintaining one broadband, one mobile hard network. So that is a kind of switchover in organization. In every point of infrastructure, they will maintain a redundant. Redundant is related to physical device, two physical devices. If one particular switch is failed, whatever the switch connections are connected to that particular switch, all systems are going to impact. So how to achieve that? By connecting other switch so that that particular network is going to come into picture without impacting my business requirement. That is, we talk about redundant. What is high availability? High availability is we are going to talk about application layer. What is the application? It is available. That application should be available with certain 100%. Even something goes wrong with any server or any application, my application should be available on another place. That it is going to switch over. The application is going to switch over to another place, another server, another resource. Okay, redundant, we talk about physical layer. The high availability it is, we are going to talk about software layer. How they are going to use the functions, it is all depend. So redundant, it is all talk about physical device. And failover. What is failover? The failover concept, it is going to come into picture. Failing one particular device. I'm managing two devices, hard disk coming to the hard disk. One hard disk failed. It is not failing over. It is just as a logical component. We are not going to observe the which is actively working. But in high availability, what it is going to be, it is going to fail over the resources to another available server. There the concept comes in active and standby. Active standby or active passive. We can call it as anything. Active passive in the sense which are the device is working currently, that device we call it as active, whereas in which are the device as a without doing any action, just a standby. Whenever the active device is failed, automatically it is going to, second device becomes online, that becomes standby. So here the high availability, for example, I'm doing two physical devices. Two physical devices I'm going to use for my internet connection. So one device is active, the another device becomes as a standby. What I'm doing this here, by using these two devices, I'm going to apply redundancy. Redundancy means make sure if one device is failed, my application will work on the standby device. That will switch over, automatically failover. That is a redundant and high availability, active, standby, or active or passive. Okay. Coming back to the right configuration, what is this right configuration? Right configuration is nothing but it talks about the server, the physical server. There are hard disks available. Our latest systems are coming with SD card. There is no requirement of RAID controller. So only one SD card is available. So we can install an operating system, virtualization operating system. Why operating system? It is, we are talking about virtualization. That virtualization, we are going to talk about some component, some vendor. Depending upon vendor, the loading operating system is differs. So whatever the virtualization we are going to talk about, it is a VMware. I'll come to that point. So there are different concepts coming. If the two server is having two hard disks by default, the blade servers, we notice that full height, half height blade is going to have two hard disks. Whenever you are using the server for virtualization, by default operating system is going to load in a local hard disk. Some hardware is supports boot from SAN also. Boot from SAN. What is that boot from SAN? SAN, what is a SAN? It is a centralized storage. Centralized storage in the sense even I can load operating system on centralized storage. That centralized storage, how it is establishing communication? The server should have a SAN HBA card so that storage team can assign a bootable LAN. Bootable LAN in the sense whatever the storage disk they are assigning to this system, they call it as a bootable LAN, logical unit number. Whatever the storage they are from this SAN device they are assigning, we call it as a LAN, logical unit number. It is just like a hard disk. So hard disk can coming from local hard disk, local storage, or from the SAN. If it is a local storage, how it is going to configure and the background? The concept is called RAID controller. In RAID controller also there are different types of controllers are available. For example, whenever you power on the server, on the post screen, you can see what type of controller it is available. Smart array controller, different per advanced controller, different for Dell servers, one RAID controller, for IBM one RAID controller. Most of the servers smart array controller, smart array RAID controller. What it is going to do? This RAID controller, what it is going to do? Whatever the disk hard disk connected to this particular controller, it is going to make it as a one logical. What is the logical we are going to use? Go to the RAID configurations view and understand RAID 1 or RAID 5. We are not going to use RAID 0 for loading an operating system. This is also one of the important interview questions. Why we are using RAID concept for this our operating system installation? What is the reason? If one hard disk is going to having some issue, my operating system should not impact. So what RAID controller I need to choose? Here, RAID 1 is nothing but a mirror. Mirror in the sense, whatever the data I'm going to write on a hard disk 1, it is going to write the data on hard disk 2 in a similar fashion. What is the read and write and all those things concept comes in, go to the RAID concepts and understand what is a RAID. Because we are going to load on a virtualization operating system, that virtualization operating system should not impact my virtualization server running should not impact due to hard disk failure. So to avoid that, what is the available functions? What is the available scenarios? A RAID controller. If I'm getting using local storage, if I'm going to have, definitely all server hardwares are going to have by default 2 hard disks. Latest vendors, latest server hardwares are supporting boot from SAN or SD card. If they are using SD card, what is the function they are going to use? You should understand. Okay, so all these concepts comes in RAID configuration. We go through the RAID concepts. What is the RAID 0? What is RAID 1? We are not going to talk about RAID 0. We can remove that RAID 0 concept from these RAID concepts. Generally, whatever the server hardware we are going to use for a virtualization installation, they go with RAID 1. So hope understand remote management and RAID controller. Next, type of virtualization. Type of virtualization comes in picture. We need to understand what virtualization we did on our system. Whenever we are going to load an operating system, an application on top of it and one particular OS, what we did in VMware Workstation, we created our lab on VMware Workstation. What we did on that, first there is an hardware. On top of it hardware, there is an operating system. What is the operating system in our lab? On a desktop system, we load an operating system, Windows 10, Windows 8, or whatever it may be. Once Windows installation, on top of it, what we did, we install an application called VMware Workstation. VMware Workstation, what purpose we created? That VMware Workstation is going to use as a virtualization layer. Where is that virtualization layer? By using that virtualization layer, I am able to create a virtual machine. So there are two types of virtualization concepts here. One is hosted architecture, another one is bare metal architecture. Hosted architecture in the sense, if we are installing virtualization on top of it, any OS, generally I can use as an operating system as a Windows 10 or any operating system. On top of it, I'm going to load a virtualization feature. That concept we call it as a hosted architecture. The other architecture, what we call it as bare metal architecture. Bare metal in the sense, I'm loading a virtualization layer on top of it hardware directly. There is no interface between, mediator in between my virtualization layer and hardware. But in hosted architecture, what is happening here? In hosted architecture, the virtualization between the virtualization layer and the hardware, there is an operating system. Either it can be Linux, it can be Windows or anything. So virtualization layer directly talking to the hardware, that is bare metal architecture. If the virtualization layer talking to the hardware through a certain operating system, that is hosted architecture. You can see here what is a symbol representation here. Two diagrams. There is another way of calling types of virtualization. Type 1, type 2 virtualization. Some members, so they call it as type 1, type 2. Some members, they are going to call it as a hosted architecture, bare metal architecture. What is hosted architecture? What is a bare metal architecture? You should understand both, correlate with each other. Simple example of hosted architecture, our lab. In our lab, what we did, we installed a VMware workstation to create virtual servers, where we did installation on top of it Windows 10. Once Windows 10 is installed, I install VMware workstation as an virtualization layer. That is hosted architecture. Okay, so type 1, see here in the diagram, what is the hardware? Host hardware platform. Both in both scenarios, you can see host hardware platform, host hardware platform. See, host OS, type 2 hypervisor, hypervisor virtualization, both are similar terminology. hypervisor. Some members they call it as hypervisor layer. Some members they call it as a virtualization layer. Okay, both are refers to same concept. No need to get confusion. Hypervisor layer and virtualization layer both are similar concept. By seeing this diagram, you can see here hardware is available in both places, but hypervisor is available directly talking to the hardware here. But in this particular type 2 hypervisor, what is there? It is talking to the hardware through an OS. Okay, so and once a hypervisor is there, on top of hypervisor, what we did, we are able to create virtual machines. We created 3 virtual machines for our lab. So where we created first here Windows OS, Windows 10 it is there. On top of Windows 10, we install VMware workstation here. On top of VMware workstation, we created virtual machines for our lab. Once virtual machine is created, we install guest operating system 2008, 2012, and then configure DNS, DHCP applications. This is the structure. The same structure we are going to replace with a bare metal architecture. See here, the hypervisor, the virtualization layer directly contacting the hardware's platform here. So the same remaining same function. Whatever the VMs are here, the same. The guest OS installation, application installation, everything same. But what is the difference between hosted architecture and bare metal architecture? The simple principle that what is the hypervisor layer? Where the hypervisor layer is that hypervisor layer directly contacting to hardware without any mediator, or is it depending on some host, some operating system? That is the only difference. Types of virtualization, there are 2 types, hosted architecture or bare metal architecture. Sometimes they will call it as type 1, type 2 architecture, or type 1 virtualization, type 2 virtualization. Or the virtualization concept, they are going to, sometimes they are going to use a hypervisor. Okay, so hope you understand type of virtualization, only 2 types. Next, virtualization vendors. There are different vendors available in virtualizations. What type of virtualizations available? VMware. VMware is a vendor that provides a virtualization application softwares. That VMware workstation, one type of application. There is VMware vSphere, that is enterprise application. It is a OS. What are the applications it is going to support in environment that all provided by VMware vendor. There is a Microsoft. Even Microsoft also provides a Hyper-V. For each virtualization, they call it as a different terminology. We talk about virtualization or a hypervisor, but VMware is going to talk about VMware vSphere. VMware vSphere is nothing but virtualization. VMware vSphere Data Center Virtualization, DCV. DCV in the sense of Data Center Virtualization, VMware. Microsoft, they call it as a Hyper-V. Citrix, they call it as a Gen Server. Red Hat, KVM. Oracle, Sun Solaris, Sun Jones, XVM, there are different vendors are available. So what the vendors, what type of virtualization it is going to provide, what is the features? It is most important thing is that the features compatibility of what are the applications we are going to load on the respective virtual hardware. I'm going to load virtual hardware. On top of virtual hardware, my requirement is to load Windows operating system. What are the operating system we are going to load that should have a compatibility with the hardware? For every system, for every operating system, there we need to check compatibility. If that operating system is not compatible, I cannot load operating system. So each virtualization vendor, how many operating systems, how many versions it is going to support, that matters, that plays in a vendor's dominance. So VMware is dominating with virtualization world because the compatibility, that number of operating system support and the number of features it is going to support, and all those matters comes in picture. If your environment using only Microsoft servers, Microsoft Windows servers, Microsoft desktops, then it is preferable to go with Microsoft virtualization, that is Hyper-V. There are different dependencies, different requirements. What is the compatibility? What is high availability? All those things, concepts comes in how we are going to manage a centralized management console. What are the features are available? Okay, so in particular virtualization vendors, here it is going to play an important role. How the virtualization world is dominated by VMware, why it is dominated by VMware, why the more customers are using only VMware. You should understand the features, you should understand how it is compatible for multiple operating systems, what are the options are available to perform functions and all those things. So that's the reason while choosing a virtualization vendor, we need to consider what is the requirement and all those things. If you consider licensing also, VMware costs more than any other virtualization layer. Okay, even IBM VIOS is also virtualization, but it is not compatible for any Linux operating system, Windows operating system. It is only compatible for only AX servers, AX operating system, IBM operating system only it supports. Yeah. Earlier, VMware, before VMware virtualization, IBM virtualization is available very long back, but it is only available for only AX operating system. AX is an operating system from IBM, Linux-based, Unix-based operating system. So as soon as the virtualization concept comes in, they talk about what is the features. They are going to keep on updating the available options and all those things. So we are going to discuss about what is VMware. First, what we understand, what is the harm, why the virtualization is required. We understand that, and after that, we understand that virtualization is only requirement in enterprise location, only physical servers. But in our lab, we use VMware orchestration as a hypervisor layer to create some functions. But in enterprise, we cannot use VMware orchestration as an enterprise requirement. There are certain limitations. Okay, we should understand what is the limitations and what is the use and everything. So out of these all virtualization vendors, we are going to learn about VMware. The VMware, vSphere, data center virtualization, what we are going to learn. Okay, so rest all the features, you should go through internet and understand what is a comparison. You can search VMware versus Microsoft. You can search VMware versus Citrix. The virtualization concepts, what's the difference between, what is the compatibility and all those things. Okay, what are the features, what is the compatibility, what is interoperability, what is the stability. These all things matters while leading the market, leading the world. Okay, that's why VMware is providing more features than any other competitor. That's the reason VMware is more popular than any other virtualization. Okay. Next, we'll talk about what is the components are going to come into picture. Data center virtualization. We are here, it is 2019, but we can change it to 2020. What is 2007, 2008? Whatever the year it may be, TCV, data center virtualization. We are going to talk about VMware data center virtualization. What is VCP? VCP is nothing but VMware certified professional. The certification, whoever completes the training, the VMware authorized training, they have to attend VMware authorized training. Then once training is done, they are going to conduct a test. Who are completed the test, they are going to certified, that VMware certified professional. Okay, that we'll talk about later. Coming to the topic, VMware data center virtualization. What are the components are coming into picture? Here, there are different components in VMware data center virtualization, VMware vSphere. What are the components are coming into picture? There are different components are coming here. ESXi. What is ESXi? It is an operating system. vCenter server, vSphere server, VA server. Earlier days we call it as a virtual center server, virtual infrastructure server, vCenter server. Now we call it as a vSphere server. Okay, now the terminology changed to vSphere. Earlier days we call it as a virtual infrastructure server, vCenter server, vSphere server. What is this server? We know that ESXi is an operating system. What is vCenter server? vCenter server is a component, is an application to man a centralized management application. What is the centralized management application? Centralized management application is nothing but the single ESXi host is the only standalone ESXi host. If I need to manage 10 ESXi hosts together from a single console, that request comes in picture vSphere server, wherein I can do all centralized management functions from a vSphere server. vSphere server is nothing but centralized management console to manage the ESXi hosts. And what is the ESXi host? I'm installing ESXi host on top of it a hardware. Why we are doing that? To create virtual servers, to create virtual systems. So I can manage. If I have my organization have 10 ESXi hosts, each ESXi host having a 50 VMs. That is, in essence, 10 ESXi host is going to maintain 500 VMs. So all these components, I can manage through a centralized component that we call it as vSphere server. That application, vSphere server is an application, centralized management application. It is not a virtualization operating system. It is a centralized management console to manage virtual machines and ESXi hosts. Okay, so the two components. First is ESXi, it is an operating system. The second component is a vCenter server or a vSphere server or VA server. It is a centralized management console to manage the ESXi host and associated virtual machines. The next component is VI client, VC client, thin client, vSphere client. These all components are client tools. We have a server. How we are accessing, how we are connecting that server. We are using some third-party tool to access that server to manage the functions. So vSphere server is available, or ESXi host is available. To connect these two functions, I should have some kind. That client we call it as VA client, VC client, thin client, vSphere client. This client we are nothing but we are installing some component on our desktop system, on our server. Anywhere you can use this vSphere client so that you can access either ESXi host or the vCenter server. By using this client, if you connect individual ESXi host, you can perform only that one single ESXi host and associated VMs. By using this VA client, if you connect vCenter server, whatever the ESXi host available on that vCenter server, you are able to perform, you are able to manage everything. That is in the sense, the client tool is used for to establish communication to vCenter server or the ESXi host. Where I'm going to connect by using this client, which one I'm connecting? Am I connecting to ESXi host? Am I connecting to centralized management console? What is my requirement? So that I connect both the things, anything. So to manage certain actions, to perform certain actions. So the third component is a client tool. The next component is web client. Web client, we call it as a web client. Web client is different. vSphere client is different. vSphere client is nothing but a executable installation on respective server or system. Whereas a web client, there is no installable component. It is by using the browser, you can access either ESXi host or the vCenter server. Through browser, without installing any component in my system, through browser, I can access my ESXi host or vCenter server. Fifth one, virtual machine, VM, guest. Sometimes they call it as a guest. Some people they call it as a guest. Virtual machine, VM. These five virtual machine is nothing but a virtual hardware I'm creating by using where I'm creating on top of it virtualization layer. What is my virtualization layer? Here in this concept, ESXi. ESXi is my virtualization layer. By using that virtualization layer, I'm able to create a virtual hardware. That virtual hardware I'm not calling as a virtual system, virtual machine, VM. This is a product suite, the vSphere data center virtualization product suite. What are the components are available? What we need to do first? What action we can perform next? Everything we are going to discuss. So what we need to understand, sequence way, basic understanding for starting to till now. What are the components we understand? So next onwards, we are going to work on the ESXi host installation. Tomorrow, I am going to show you, the next session, I am going to show you how to install an ESXi on a VMware workstation. Once VMware workstation is ready, how to install VMware workstation, then the same thing we are going to install on a physical server. There are different components we need to understand. So first, there is no remote management card is not available on physical server, which is available for live testing. So what we are doing, we are going to install on a VMware workstation how to create on our lab. You can do on your lab. For everyone, it is not possible to load an ESXi host on a lab. So Srini is going to provide the physical server. Unfortunately, that physical server is not coming with remote management card, due to which we are going to do some action to see how the installation is happening on a live server. You can search in internet how the live servers, you know that how the live server hardware look like, everything you know, but live environment, live practice is very much required to understand the concepts. So tomorrow we are going to load, tomorrow session we are going to load ESXi on VMware workstation. If you have a lab, you're already maintaining a lab, get ready how to load ESXi on a VMware workstation. Okay, that's for today's session. See you tomorrow session. Bye.